Mila Kunis became a household name before most people learned to drive. A freshman in Hollywood at 14, she landed a role that would define her teen years, her public image, and, depending on who you ask, her entire career arc. The irony? The job that changed everything also set the stage for moments that look very different under today's lens. You can admire the hustle and still wince at what a kid was pushed to carry on screen. That tension, success versus sacrifice, is the real story that keeps resurfacing every time an old clip goes viral or a new headline drops. For millions of viewers, Jackie Burkhart was comedy gold, dramatic, sharp-tongued, fashion-obsessed, a walking punchline with perfect timing. But behind the punchlines was a kid negotiating adult expectations, adult schedules, and adult scenes. And each time the internet rediscovers those early talk show interviews, the same question returns. How much did the machine ask from someone who was barely in high school? Because the glow of a breakout doesn't erase the cost, it just hides it until somebody hits play again. But to understand how this image hardened so early, you have to start at the beginning, at the first audition that rewired her life. Imagine being 14 and landing the role that would define your entire teenage life. That's exactly what happened with Mila Kunis on that '70s show. In later interviews, she's been candid. She told producers she was older so she could audition, a move that reads less like a scandal and more like survival in an industry that often sidelines real teens. Productions prefer performers who can legally work longer hours. Minors require tutors, stricter schedules, and constant paperwork. She understood the rule book, found a way through it, and won the part, setting off a career sprint before most kids have even picked a high school elective. Once the contract was signed, the treadmill started moving, fast. There were table reads and studio school, long shooting days and early press, a tightrope between algebra homework and multicam blocking. Kunis has recounted that when she told the team she needed a studio teacher, that's when the full reality of her age clicked for some people. But the show already worked. The character popped, the chemistry read on camera, and the audience connected immediately. Momentum took over, and momentum rarely stops to ask a kid if they need a minute. That's the uncomfortable truth behind a legendary breakout. The machine doesn't slow down just because the star is still a freshman in real life. For viewers, Jackie Burkhart was quick-witted and magnetic. For Kunis, the job also meant adult expectations wrapped around a teenager's schedule. It's a clean, factual snapshot of how Hollywood operates, why a teen might stretch the truth to get in the room, why producers lean toward older hires, and how a single role can launch a career while quietly redefining what normal looks like at 14. And the moments that felt like just TV back then, some of them land a lot harder now. Old clips have a way of coming back to life at the worst possible time, and for Mila Kunis, a handful of vintage talk show interviews continue to spark heated debate. One of the most striking moments came when Ashton Kutcher openly admitted that kissing his 14-year-old co-star for a scripted scene felt slightly illegal. Around the same time, reports circulated about Danny Masterson making a bet with Kutcher over whether he'd French kiss her during filming. Kunis herself later admitted she was terrified. It was her first real kiss, and it happened not in private, but in front of cameras, colleagues, and a live studio audience. Back then, this was brushed off as lighthearted banter. Today, those same clips feel like a cautionary snapshot of how blurred boundaries once passed for entertainment. The reactions online are deeply divided. Some viewers insist it was a product of its time, a late 90s sitcom that leaned into edgy humor and teenage romance and nothing more. They argue that trying to apply today's lens retroactively misses the cultural context of that era. But others see it very differently. To them, these resurfaced moments highlight exactly how a freshman teen was placed in storylines and situations meant for adults, without the protections or distance a minor should have had. Both views underline the same undeniable fact. Those episodes existed, and they shaped both how the audience saw Jackie Burkhart and how Mila was treated in the spotlight. What hasn't changed is the emotional punch these interviews pack when they resurface. They remind viewers that that '70s show was more than a career launch. It was also a workplace where a teenager navigated uncomfortable scenarios under the bright lights of Hollywood. Whether you defend it as a different time or condemn it as evidence of systemic issues, the clips force everyone to pause and reconsider what passed for normal. And that ongoing debate is why they keep resurfacing decades later. Because they're no longer just entertainment, they're cultural evidence of how the industry once failed to draw a line between childhood and adulthood. Because the Jackie persona wasn't just funny, it was shaped, scene after scene, into something more adult than her age. Jackie Burkhart quickly became one of the most recognizable characters on that 70s show, glamorous, dramatic, and obsessed with boys. On screen, the jokes landed effortlessly, and audiences loved the over-the-top energy she brought to every scene. But beneath the laugh track, Jackie's storylines often leaned heavily on over-sexualization, even though Mila Kunis was a real teenager playing a teenage role. In interviews, Kunis has joked about kissing everyone in the cast and admitted that her parents weren't exactly thrilled with how her character was portrayed. What was written as comedy turned into a pattern, and patterns in sitcoms have power. They shape perception, not just of the character but of the young actress behind it. This is where things get complicated. Jackie wasn't just a character who happened to be flirty. Her entire arc was built around it. Week after week, Kunis had to deliver lines, wear outfits, and play scenarios that positioned her more as an object of desire than as a fully rounded teenager. The laughs kept coming, the ratings kept rising, and the writers leaned into what worked. But when you consider that Kunis was still in high school while performing these storylines, it reframes the humor as something heavier. It wasn't just a character being exaggerated for comedy, it was a real teen being asked to embody a stereotype that would follow her long after the cameras stopped rolling. Kunis herself has said she felt embraced and protected by her castmates, and those positive memories can exist alongside the truth that the scripts often put her in uncomfortable boxes. The danger was never just about one kiss or one outfit. It was the way repetition turned Jackie's exaggerated persona into Mila's public identity. For years, audiences blurred the line between the actress and the character, making it harder for her to be seen beyond Jackie Burkhart. That's the double-edged sword of sitcom fame. The role that launches your career can also define you in ways you never fully agreed to. And for Mila, Jackie was both her greatest gift and her earliest cage. And while the show built careers, the friend group it created would become its own headline engine, years later for very different reasons. Every hit show creates its own mythology, and that 70s show was no exception. Fans have spent decades dissecting who in the cast was genuinely close, who kept their distance, and who seemed like an outsider. On the surface, that might sound like harmless gossip, but the conversations took on new weight as real-world controversies surfaced. Wilmer Valderrama's dating history, for example, has been re-examined again and again, especially his teenage relationship with Mandy Moore, which she later confirmed, and the age gap dynamics that followed him into adulthood. When Demi Lovato released the song 29, many listeners interpreted it as a raw reflection of their own history with Valderrama, reigniting debates about what was once brushed off as just Hollywood normal. These stories don't disappear, they just evolve with time. What makes this so important is how the microculture of a cast becomes part of a larger cultural memory. Inside jokes, behind-the-scenes bonds, and even throwaway comments at rap parties were once private moments. But when they live on in archived interviews, talk show appearances, and fan recollections, they stop being personal and start being permanent. For the cast of that 70s show, those dynamics are frozen in time and constantly reinterpreted. What used to be funny banter between friends now reads differently when viewed against the backdrop of modern conversations about power, age, and responsibility in Hollywood. And this is the crux of the problem. The past doesn't stay in the past when it's documented on national television and replayed endlessly online. Friendships, rivalries, and casual remarks become artifacts that the public revisits whenever new scandals or cultural shifts bring them back into focus. The art and the off-screen dynamics are forever intertwined, and no matter how much time has passed, the internet continues to dig them back up. For the cast, that means their shared history isn't just nostalgic entertainment, it's evidence constantly being re-examined through the lens of today's values. That archive isn't only about awkward laughs, though. It also holds real loss, and the way loss changes how people remember the past. Every sitcom has its breakout stars, but not everyone gets the happy ending. For that 70s show, one of the most heartbreaking stories belongs to Lisa Robin Kelly, who played Lori Foreman, Eric's mischievous older sister. At first, her character added comedic spark and edgy tension to the show, but behind the scenes, Kelly was struggling. She eventually left the series, attempted a comeback, and faced years of personal battles that were painfully documented in the press. In 2013, tragedy struck when she died at just 43 years old. The official coroner's report listed the cause as accidental multiple drug intoxication, a stark and devastating end that still lingers in fans' minds. When news of her passing broke, it hit fans differently than a typical Hollywood headline. This wasn't just another celebrity story. It was tied to a show that millions of people grew up watching. Suddenly, scenes that once made audiences laugh took on a heavier undertone. Lori's sharp one-liners, once just sitcom banter, now felt like pieces of a bigger, sadder puzzle. Fans couldn't help but revisit her episodes and see not just the comedy, but the fragility of a performer whose struggles eventually overshadowed her talent. It's important to be clear. There's no direct line from the That 70s Show set to what happened in Kelly's life afterward. Hollywood is filled with stories of young actors who fight personal battles, and life is rarely that simple to trace. But tragedy has a way of reshaping perception. When you know how a story ends, you can't help but watch the beginning differently. The bright lights of the sitcom now come with shadows, and every smile, every joke, every scene with Kelly feels a little more fragile in retrospect. That's the bittersweet truth about nostalgia. It never stays pure. What once was carefree entertainment becomes something layered, even haunting, once you know the pain behind the curtain. For fans of That 70s Show, Lisa Robin Kelly's story is a sobering reminder that fame doesn't shield anyone from hardship. Instead, it often magnifies the struggles. And so, every time people rewatch the series, her absence becomes just as noticeable as her presence once was, turning laughter into a complicated mix of joy and loss. Which brings us to the headlines that detonated the archive and forced everyone, especially Mila, to pick their words carefully. In September 2023, the world learned of a verdict that would forever change the legacy of That 70s Show. Danny Masterson, who had played Stephen Hyde, was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison after being found guilty on 2 counts of sexual assault. The case had already drawn years of headlines, but the fallout didn't stop in the courtroom. Almost immediately after sentencing, reports surfaced that Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis had written character reference letters asking the judge for leniency. For fans, the revelation was shocking. These weren't just background statements. They were heartfelt defenses of a man convicted of horrific crimes. The backlash was swift, fierce, and unavoidable. Within hours, Kutcher and Kunis released a joint video apologizing for the letters, saying they never intended to undermine survivors or cause harm. But the damage was done. Social media lit up, old clips resurfaced, and once innocent talk show anecdotes were recirculated as evidence of questionable dynamics within the cast. Photos of the group, once celebrated as nostalgic snapshots of a beloved sitcom, now carried an entirely different weight. The internet had made up its mind. What might have been seen as loyalty to a co-star read instead as complicity, and no explanation could fully undo that perception. For Mila Kunis in particular, this was a brutal contradiction. She had often credited her That 70s Show co-stars, Masterson included, with helping her avoid destructive choices as a teenager in Hollywood. She described them as a surrogate family who kept her grounded. But in the wake of Masterson's conviction, those words collided with a painful new reality. How could the same people she praised for protecting her be tied to such dark actions? Both things can be true. Her gratitude was genuine, and yet the public no longer wanted to hear it. The internet thrives on contradictions, and here it turned her own past words into part of the backlash. The bigger takeaway is how unforgiving the digital age can be. In 2023, nothing lives in isolation. Every new statement exists alongside every old one, whether it's a character letter, a decades-old interview, or a viral clip pulled from the archives. That's the paradox of fame today. You can build your career on transparency, honesty, and gratitude, but the moment history shifts, those same words can be used against you. For Kutcher and Kunis, the Masterson letters became more than just a PR crisis. They became a cautionary tale about loyalty, judgment, and how quickly public trust can evaporate when it collides with a guilty verdict. So where does that leave her? Beyond the clips, the letters, and the never-ending comment section, when Mila Kunis reflects on her teenage years in Hollywood, her story is strikingly different from many of her peers. She's openly said that she felt supported on set, surrounded by people who modeled healthier choices and steered her away from the pitfalls of young fame. Unlike countless other child stars, Kunis avoided the tabloid meltdowns, public scandals, and destructive spirals that often haunt actors who grow up under bright lights. In her own telling, the set of that '70s show became more of a safety net than a trap, shielding her from paths that could have led to a very different outcome. For many fans, that resilience is one of the reasons she's managed to endure in an industry that is notorious for chewing up its youngest stars. But public memory is never static. It's a remix, constantly reshaped by the internet. Those same interviews where she laughed about her first on-screen kiss or bantered about playing Jackie are no longer viewed as harmless nostalgia. The slightly illegal jokes, the talk show confessions, and the over-sexualized storylines have all been clipped, re-uploaded, and dissected through today's lens. Add the recent controversy surrounding the Masterson letters, and suddenly her past comments aren't just memories, they're evidence, debated and reinterpreted endlessly. What once made her relatable now fuels questions about how much was asked of a child actress and whether Hollywood's machine really protected her or simply managed her. Still, Kunis hasn't stepped away. Instead, she's taken control where she can, choosing projects that interest her, building a family with Ashton Kutcher, and carving out a career that has spanned comedy hits, dramatic performances, and voice work. She continues to balance her private life with public scrutiny, understanding better than anyone that in today's digital age, you don't erase the narrative. You just keep adding chapters. The agency she has now is real, but it exists alongside an archive that the internet won't stop replaying. That duality is the reality of her fame. She is both the teenager frozen in reruns and the adult woman navigating her own path. And that's the larger cost of growing up on camera. The very role that launched her career at 14 also locked her into an identity the world refuses to let go of. Every new choice she makes as an adult is filtered through the lens of Jackie Burkhart, through the prism of early talk show interviews, and through the scandals of her co-stars. Even when she exercises agency, the audience compares her to the version they met first. Maybe that's the harsh truth of child stardom. No matter how far you've come, the world insists on holding you to the script it wrote for you when you were still a kid. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next upload. And don't forget to drop a like and share your thoughts in the comments. It helps the channel grow and lets me know what stories you want covered next.